Here's to holiday traditions, the ones that started as a quick laugh but are now irreplaceable. Here's to the recipes that require Grandma's mixing bowl because they just won't taste the same without it. The Chinette brand believes in spending more time on traditions and less time cleaning up. With the Chinette Crystal, Comfort, and Classic collections, we can help make your holiday celebrations better for years to come. Here's to mixing timeless traditions with a few new ones. Here's to us, all of us. To find out more, visit mychinette.com. Here's to holiday traditions, the ones that started as a quick laugh but are now irreplaceable. Here's to the recipes that require Grandma's mixing bowl because they just won't taste the same without it. The Chinette brand believes in spending more time on traditions and less time cleaning up. With the Chinette Crystal, Comfort, and Classic collections, we can help make your holiday celebrations better for years to come. Here's to mixing timeless traditions with a few new ones. Here's to us, all of us. To find out more, visit mychinette.com.
Welcome, friends, it's the MovieFilm Podcast. MovieFilm Podcast, enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian are talking about movies. MovieFilm Podcast on the radio.
Welcome to MovieFilm. This is episode 277. We are recording here on Columbus Day, or Indigenous Peoples Day, depending on where you live, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I am Zachy Hassan.
And I'm Brian Hall.
What's happening, Brian? What are you doing on Columbus Day?
I am in New York, and a good friend of ours got married this weekend. So it's been sort of a wedding weekend, going to receptions and meeting people from literally all over the world. It's met a lot of fun and amazing people this weekend. It's been kind of a blast. A lot of great food. So, and enjoying, I wouldn't quite call it fall weather, what you would imagine. It's not that cool, but it is cooler than it's been in Los Angeles. So I'm enjoying being out here. How about yourself?
Well, I was going to ask, are you going to celebrate Columbus Day by watching his film Home Alone 2, Lost in New York?
I'm going to celebrate the whole Columbus catalog. I'm going to start with Gremlins, right? Because he has had such an interesting career, hasn't he? I mean, he was a Spielberg guy for a minute there, Chris Columbus. Mm-hmm. He was Gremlins, Goonies, and then I think his directorial debut was Adventures in Babysitting. And then he goes on to do Home Alone, scored by John Williams, and the Harry Potter films, the early ones. I mean, he's an interesting guy.
It's quite the redemption arc after beginning his career by coming to America and slaughtering the indigenous people. I think, it's a good redemption story. Really,
It's just amazing that all this time later he could find like comedy and all sorts of things and the culture that he forced into being. Yeah. Let's go with Indigenous People Day for our show.
Yeah. Do you remember, like, in the 90s, there were two competing Christopher Columbus movies?
Yes. 1492 or whatever it is.
Yes.
1492. And then what was the other one?
Well, 1492 was the one with Gerard Depardieu, I believe, right?
That's a name I've not heard in a long time. Long time. Yes.
1492, that's Ridley Scott.
Oh my, wow. And it's like that movie doesn't even exist.
I know. Isn't that funny?
Wow. Ridley Scott?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I've forgotten. I just remember the imagery of it. The trailer is very golden. Anyway, what was the other one?
The other one was Christopher Columbus: The Discovery, which was produced by the Salkinds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that had Marlon Brando, and I think Tom Selleck was in it.
Really? So they kept a good relationship with Brando then, huh?
Either that or the check cleared. I mean, I don't think. Right. I don't think by 1992 Marlon Brando is particularly hung up on the art of the thing.
Sure.
But yeah, that was the year. It's like, oh, we got competing Columbus movies, and as far as I know, neither one of them did particularly well.
I was not putting it together. I guess 92. That was 200 years or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there you go. There you go.
But by the way, I mean, I think the problem, especially 30 years after, is like, well, Columbus was a horrific person. He's, he does not deserve to be celebrated. because he was
Right.
a genocidal warmonger, so it's there's this extra element of when you watch those films. I mean, I haven't seen the Saul kind one, but I've seen the Ridley Scott movie.
Well, that's what's so fascinating, right? I mean, not like speaking for myself, that I'm not aware of how this country became what it is now and how horrifying it was. But I recently watched 1923, the Yellowstone spinoff. And I
Oh,
mean, if
that's
you
so good.
want to like have your blood boil,
Uh-huh.
like that story is just infuriating, and it makes me feel
How good
so
is that show, by the way?
so good. So
Right?
I loved it. I loved it. I thought 1883 was good.
Yeah.
But I really loved 1923. But I was gonna say, Killers of the Flower Moon, we got
Hmm.
coming. It's nice that we have these stories because it's important not to forget them. But it's funny thinking back to our childhood. I mean, we were celebrating Christopher Columbus. He was like a hero,
That's
right?
right.
Like we were
Hmm.
making, construction paper,
Hmm.
projects out of Christopher Columbus. So it's just, I guess it's nice that over time things finally, hopefully, start to correct themselves a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think just fundamentally, it's one of those things where you never question as a kid, but certainly as an adult, it's like, well, how can you be the first person to discover a land where people exist already?
I know. This is mine now. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I mean, notwithstanding the source, Louis C.K., he has that thing about how like Columbus just lands in America and he's like, "Hey, you guys are Indians, right?" It's like, "No, no, we're not. We're we're not Indians." "What are you talking about? This is in India?" "No, no, not India." "Ah, you're Indians."
Right. Right.
"That's it. You're Indians forever."
Yep. And then cut to years later, our teachers are like, "Yay, yeah, Columbus!" It's like, yeah.
Well, hey, speaking of Ridley Scott, I know you were going to mention stuff you have seen recently, but this is a good segue because I watched a somewhat forgotten Ridley Scott movie just last night, Brian.
What's that?
It's called Exodus: Gods and Kings.
I remember this. I have not seen this, so I'm very curious to hear. He's so really Scott is so like masterpiece or okay,
it's,
you know.
it's true. I mean, for every gladiator, there's like a beautiful year or whatever that was with
Right. Wow, I forgot about that one.
a memorable year. What was that movie with?
Yeah, about Russell Crowe and wine or something, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It wasn't a beautiful year because it's a beautiful mind, but
Right, right. Something like that. I remember
uh,
that film, yeah.
a good year.
A good year.
Which this is called a fine year. It's fine. That one I have not seen, but I don't think a lot of people did. I think Ridley Scott. What is he like? 90 now,
Wow.
right?
He's got to be approaching it at the very least. And he has the Napoleon epic coming up, so there's no slowing
Yeah.
down for him.
So Ridley Scott is 85, so he's getting close to 90, and he's just got this like just crank it out ethic, which you gotta respect. Uh, Exodus is, I mean, that movie came out during the span of this show existing, our show.
Yeah.
And to the best of my knowledge, we've never mentioned it until this moment.
Yeah. And I mean, it has Christian Bale in it, right?
Christian Bale, Joel Edgerton, Sigourney Weaver, Aaron Paul,
Wow.
Indira Varma. It's a good cast.
Yeah.
And it is interesting. I was talking to Amin about it. I think it's worth watching.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It is different. Like I appreciate that it's not doing, it's not approaching the Exodus story from like the Ten Commandments, Cecil B. DeMille perspective.
Which I was gonna say, I love the Ten Commandments. I
Yeah,
was one of those kids like on Sunday night, like on The Simpsons, where they're
yeah,
watching the biblical epic, and then it's like all of a sudden the next morning, and it's time for school, and they're like, "What?" Because you got
yeah.
so caught up in it. I mean, I watched it every year whenever it aired.
Oh,
So
I love the Ten Commandments. I mean, Chuck
yeah,
Heston is so iconic, and so it's kind of like, well, you can't do that again without inviting an unfair comparison,
sure.
right?
And do you mean like I don't know what word I'm looking for, like theatricality or like bombast
Definitely,
or
definitely that, and sort of the spectacle of it, right?
mm-hmm.
This one is definitely. I mean, you got a big cast, and it is an epic in scale, but I think Scott's approach is an interesting one, and I'm I was talking to Amina. I was like, Muslims revere Moses, right?
Mhm.
So I was like, well, am I going to be offended by this?
Sure.
And I don't think I was. The approach is where the miracles are sort of grounded in kind of a like a this is how it might have happened framework.
Okay.
But does it mean it's not a miracle? Well, we're not going to say. You know what I mean?
Right. Sure.
And you for example, they have him climbing Mount Sinai, and there's like an avalanche, and he's hit by these rocks, and he's like in and out of consciousness, and he has the revelation with the burning bush. So you're like, well, did he actually see it, or is it in his head? And the movie does that throughout.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was really interesting because I'm like, well, even if Moses is talking to God, other people would be like, is he really talking to God?
Right.
Right. So they do this thing that I think is really interesting, where throughout the film he's visited by this little boy who is, in his mind, that's the personification of God.
Mm-hmm. That's who he
And
communicates with.
yeah, and the little boy is like, I need you to return to Egypt, and da, 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 you
Mhm.
know, and and so again, you're like, well, is he actually seeing that?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, well, this is interesting to me because I think, it's a way of framing the story in a way where people who are not religious will still be able to get something out of it.
Yeah. Oh, I'll have to check it out. I mean, I
Yeah.
definitely knew about it, but it just sort of passed me by. But it sounds like something I'd be interested in.
Yeah, I actually think that the sequence where they show the parting of the sea, I thought it was very clever the way they did it.
Now, yeah, don't tell me. Now I'm kind of
Yeah.
curious how they're gonna
Yeah, I'd be
approach that.
and Christian Bale is of course great, right?
Yeah.
And obviously he's gonna play Moses from a very different place than Heston, right?
Sure.
Heston is like a piece of granite, and that's where his iconography comes from. uh Bale is obviously, bringing his Christian Bale energy, much more conflicted. I think that's very interesting. I
Mm-hmm.
think Edgerton is very good as Ramses. At the time the film came out, there was this complaint, oh, why is it all these, or not even all, but like, you've got, a lot of ethnically appropriate actors, but Christian Bale,
Yeah.
Joel Edgerton, Sigourney Weaver, Aaron Paul are very not Egyptian, right?
Yeah.
And Ridley Scott was very glib. He said something to the effect of like, well, if I cast Muhammad so and so, I'm not going to be able to get the funding. And I'm like, you don't have to say
And then he's like, "Happy Christopher Columbus Day." I mean,
as he raises a wine glass skyward. Yeah.
yeah.
But here's the thing. As a brown person, I'm like, well, the actors are good in it.
Yeah.
They do a good job. Christian Bale's good in it. Edgerton is terrific. I didn't even recognize Aaron Paul, and because we don't place Aaron Paul in like a biblical epic.
Yeah. No. No.
But it's not like an unreserved thumbs up, but I did appreciate a lot of it, and I'd be very curious what you think of it.
Yeah, I'll put that on the list. I'm in the mood for that. That, like, a good biblical epic sounds like I'm in the mood for that right now. So maybe I'll get to that soon.
Yeah. But what are some of the things you've seen?
Well, I'll breeze through these because there's quite a few of them. But I want to start off by saying I've been reading a book. It's the MovieFilm book club.
Yeah, we pop into the book club every once in a while.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I forgot it. I was
By
actually.
we, I mean you. You tell me what you've been reading.
Well, I read my like 100-year-old like sci-fi stuff, and I was actually thinking about picking up War of the Worlds for the flight back. So we'll see if I get to that. But I've been reading a book by full disclosure, a pal of ours, Jason Klom, and he is in the podcast space as well. He has a really great podcast called the Comedy on Vinyl podcast, where he'll get all sorts of people. I know he's had Lauren Bouchard, the creator of Bob's Burgers. He had, me on there. And we
don't hold that against him.
Yeah, no, he's had a million amazing people on there, more amazing than me. I'm at the very bottom, but he's very into the world of comedy. And so that the podcast is, a comedian taking one of their favorite comedy albums and just chatting about it for an hour. So he took his love of comedy, and he specifically 90s comedy, sketch comedy, and he wrote a book called We're Not Worthy. And he was kind enough to send me an early copy of it, and I am now talking about it way after it has been released because I am a jackass.
Well, to be fair, we haven't recorded a regular show in a little while, so
That's true. But this is like a great book. I started it. I was lucky enough to have it in PDF format at first, and so I was reading it on an airplane. And I thought, like, oh, okay, I'm going to read this thing that the guy, my friend, wanted me to check out and whatever. And the next thing I know, I'm just flipping through the whole thing for the whole flight. And it was, admittedly, I'm very interested in this topic. It begins with just the history of sort of sketch comedy going all the way back to like 40s programs and Carol Burnett and Laugh-In and all these sorts of things. And then it really digs into things like In Living Color, and The State and Kids in the Hall. And it even has the book
Ben
has
Stiller show in there.
Ben Stiller show. I read that chapter, which was really great and really interesting. I didn't know the whole MTV origins of that show.
Oh yeah.
But David Wayne does the forward, he of The State and Wet Hot American Summer and all those things. So it's a great read. I think if you're interested in that subject matter, I definitely think that's something people will enjoy. So that's We're Not Worthy by Jason Klom, and that's available pretty much anywhere, bookstores, Amazon.
Is there something in there about the edge?
I'm about 3/4 through it, so I'm not certain.
Let me know that, because I have to imagine if he talks about Ben Stiller, he has to talk about The Edge, which was another Fox sketch com, like 92, either summer or fall of 92. And like, Jennifer Aniston was on there, and
Wow.
Wayne Knight, there's people who went on to have pretty good careers.
I'm willing to bet because he goes into shows I've never heard of.
Yeah.
And like he gets even into like Improv Olympic and Second City and all those sorts of things, like those, actual comedy improv clubs that we would go to growing up and stuff, and they're still around.
Wow.
But yeah.
Well, hey, while we're talking books, I want to throw in a book plug as well. There's a book out right now called A Masterpiece in Disarray, David Lynch's Dune in Oral History.
Okay.
And this is by Max Every, and it is an exhaustive, in-depth book about the 1984 Dune.
That sounds fascinating.
Right? It's so interesting. They have, basically every person who's willing to talk about it, so not David Lynch, spoke to Max, but Kyle MacLachlan and like so many of those cast members are still around, and then dipping into archival interviews and things like that to create this really fascinating, again, oral history. And what's so great about it is that that's a masterpiece in disarray is like a pretty good way of describing that movie, because it's too fascinating to just be brushed aside as a bad movie. I wouldn't consider it good.
Yeah.
But this is something I've said about that movie often. In fact, I said it to Max because I am one of the people giving oral in that book. Let me rephrase that. I'm one of the people whose names are there, and there's things attributed to me.
Dude, that is so awesome. I get excited every time you are printed and published because I have this funny thing where I just like enjoy putting your books on my shelf. So that's very
it's really there's a section at the end where it's like sort of like retrospective or contemporary, modern reviews, or modern thoughts on it. So I'm in there along with Scott Cholera from IGN and Roxanne Haddadi and a lot of people, and I was just very honored to be even thought of, honestly. And I was surprised to see quotes. I have a quote in there where I talk about the guild navigators. They're the beings that open the warp portals. And they've been mutated by exposure to the spice.
Mm-hmm.
And you've seen the film, right? I think you
I
have.
have. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not an expert on it. I've seen it once, but yeah.
But you remember those creatures.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's to holiday traditions, the ones that started as a quick laugh but are now irreplaceable. Here's to the recipes that require Grandma's mixing bowl because they just won't taste the same without it. The Chinette brand believes in spending more time on traditions and less time cleaning up. With the Chinette Crystal, Comfort, and Classic collections, we can help make your holiday celebrations better for years to come. Here's to mixing timeless traditions with a few new ones. Here's to us, all of us. To find out more, visit mychinette.com.
And what I say in the book is making the guild navigators look like vagina face people was certainly a choice.
It was certainly a choice.
And I'm like, that now exists in print
In print, yes.
forever.
I love it.
But yeah, the book is a masterpiece in disarray. So check it out. It's a good book. I mean, I happen to be in it, but completely separate from that, it's just a good book if you're interested in that film. And I know people listening to this movie are. So,
Yeah. Dude, fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I'll mention two more things. Real briefly, I'll say I watched this movie called No One Will Save You on Hulu. Have you heard of this?
I've heard of it.
Okay, so it's basically like just a good old fashioned alien invasion movie, which
Cool.
if you know us, if you know me, sign me up. Like this is, I don't know what it was about when our youth, I guess the sort of Spielbergness of it all, starting with Close Encounters, E.T. There's just something about not just, aliens taking over the world. I mean, that's can be fun, like Independence Day or something, but I really love an alien in your backyard film. And this is quite literally that. And I'm very breezy. It's about 90 minutes. It stars Caitlin Danver in it. And what's interesting about this movie is I don't think it's a spoiler to say, but there's pretty much no dialogue in the entire thing.
Caitlin Deaver?
Oh, Deaver, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, Caitlin Deaver, which I apologize because she's fantastic in this. I mean, for someone who really says next to nothing in this film, her expressions and everything she's conveying just with her face,
Well, I just saw her a few weeks ago in Dope Sick. She's one of the main characters in that.
Oh, okay. She's great. Yeah, she's great whenever she shows up in. And so I think for people who enjoy that sort of there's an alien in my house, now what do I do kind of films, the first scene where the alien is in the house and the way that it's captured is just like chef's kiss. I mean, it's where you're sort of seeing it through like a fuzzy, screen or something. So it's obscured, but it's scary because you're seeing something move in your kitchen that isn't of this world. Like it's just that real grounded, fun, creepy sort of thing. And I another reason I wanted to bring it up, and the director, I think his name is Brian Duffield, and he does a fantastic Brian Duffield. He wrote and directed this, does a fantastic job, and I wouldn't change it. However, I did have a thought. Long since we've been doing this podcast, I keep saying, I wish M. Night Shyamalan would get his hands on other people's scripts and then just shoot the crap out of it. And when I was watching this, I was like, oh, this is what I'm talking about. If this script had been given to M. Night Shyamalan, the stuff he would have done with like his lens choices and like when he comes up with these weird, unnerving sort of angles and like, this is the type of film that I'm talking about where I'm like, oh man. See, I feel bad because I don't want to take anything away from Duffield because it's great and I'm recommending it. But it just reminded me of those types of movies where I'm like, oh man, this is that kind of thing I want to see Shyamalan apply his visual, very, very specific visual sense to and just like knock it out of the park. So anyway.
Now this is the film with like 5 words or 5 lines or whatever, right?
Just about, yeah.
That's nuts.
Yeah, it totally works though. I mean, that's we're big fans of that sort of Spielberg, Zemeckis-y, old school classical narrative through the camera style, right? I mean, for the best example off the top of my head is Roger Rabbit, right? Where you're learning everything about Eddie Valiant's brother.
Yep.
And that he's passed away and it's no words are spoken. It's all about the camera passing over pictures and newspaper articles and dust over, a desk. And there's a lot of that in this to convey the story. And Um, yeah, yeah. So
Okay, so that's on Hulu.
that's on Hulu, and then jumping streamers over to Netflix. I had to mention this, being the Wes Anderson nut that I am. I checked out the 4 films that dropped. I think we knew that The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar with Benedict Cumberbatch was coming, and that it was going to be a short film based on the Roald Dahl story. But I didn't know that there was going to be 3 other short films dropping as well. So 4 total. And have you checked these out?
I have not.
They're interesting because they're almost his sort of framing devices have gotten even crazier over the years, where it's like like Asteroid City was a television show about a play, and then sometimes you're with the play, but the play sometimes you're in the play, and that's what the actual movie is. Like, it's very dizzying, but
I
fun.
feel like we're headed towards the point where it's like framing device, framing device, framing device, framing device, framing device, credits before we even get to the actual story.
Right. But what was cool about this was it really did feel like being in the front row of a play, and it's the same actors in all of the shorts. So is it Rafe Fiennes, right? I don't want to say Ralph. I always want to say Ralph. Rafe Fiennes, Benedict Cumberbatch, Dev Patel, Ben Kingsley, and Richard Ayoade. And they play all the characters. Sometimes they play multiple characters, and it's very play-like. And just real quick, Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar. This is what Anderson, I think he lost some people with Asteroid City. Not everybody, but it was getting to be like, where's the love? Like it was a little bit more style over feeling anything for what was going on. And I feel like this is him where he is at now, using the devices he uses to perfection. I think he, all credit to Roald Dahl because he came up with the story, but I think Wes Anderson found a really unique and fun and inventive and almost breathtaking way to tell this story. I won't get into it. I mean, they're so short, just to say what they are would be almost to spoil them. But The Swan, The Ratcatcher, Poison, those are the other ones. And those are like 15 minutes. I mean, they're very, very short. You can watch them all together and it's still under 2 hours. But I'll say Poison was very good, very sort of tragic. The Ratcatcher I didn't connect with as much, but I want to speak about The Swan real quick. This was devastating.
Really?
This is, and I think I was really upset when this story ended, and it's because of the story itself.
So this is not to be confused with the reality show where people voted on plastic surgery for people.
Exactly. No. I mean,
Which is just a real thing, people. That's a real show that existed.
That happened, and we let it happen.
We let it happen.
No, this is I won't get too much into it, but it's a story about a boy that's basically tormented by these boys in his neighborhood, but it's told like forward facing, like with a narrator talking to camera, and it's very play like. So if they're in a cornfield, 2 rows of corn stalks will come into frame, but then they'll move, then there'll be a door, and then like a dock will wheel in, and then it's like, but what he's talking about is just so sad. And something about the simplicity of the way that it's executed just puts you in a zone or something. So when it was over, I was like, that is one of the most beautifully realized things that I think I've watched this year. So I'm really happy, after not being too dazzled by, Asteroid City, to watch this and go, man, the guy still got it. Wes Anderson. This is a really cool project. And I mean, say what you want about streaming services and the pluses and minuses, but the fact that they can give us something like this from a filmmaker who has so much to offer, but you couldn't do this theatrically. So it's really cool that this can exist at all in this medium. I think people who aren't into Wes Anderson, I don't know that they will find something here still. Right. I mean, it might still be too much, but I think for people who do like him, this is something I really enjoyed.
Now, how long are each of these?
Henry Sugar was about 40 minutes. And then Swan was, I want to say 15. Swan, Ratcatcher, and Poison, I want to say were about 15 each.
Okay, so Henry Sugar's the longest. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So,
okay, well, there we go.
And then just lastly, I'll throw it out there. I watched Gran Turismo, which, and have you seen this?
I have not.
Okay, so this
it is in my voodoo, however.
That's correct. It's it actually brings that up because I bought it and put it in his voodoo. It was one of those unique things where Federica and I wanted to see it, and it was still in theaters, but it was also on that sort of Fandango at home, whatever that is, where it's still like $25 or something. But we're like, it'd really be nice to watch it on the couch, you know? And so it's kind of cool.
Brian and I, we share custody of the Voodoo account. So every once in a while, I get an alimony payment in my Venmo.
I was gonna say, I mean, barely. Like that's why I feel compelled sometimes to contribute, because I get so much out of it. Yeah, recently I think I bought Neverending Story.
Yeah, that's right.
I was just like, man, I remember liking that movie, but I couldn't remember a lot about it. And it was like $5. I was like, I want to watch this.
It cut to Brian just sobbing uncontrollably as Atreyu's horse dies.
I know. It was interesting. It was definitely held together with, you know, spit and strings more than I remember as a kid. You know, just you know, the technology available at the time. Like, you can tell that they want something spectacular to happen, but they have to cut away because they can't show the thing they want. But then they can show the aftermath of the thing. Which, I mean, you know, what are you going to do? It's 1984.
You know what's funny about Neverending Story is how in the first movie the dad is played by Gerald McRaney, and in the second movie the dad is played by John Wesley Shipp.
Yes, right.
And I'm like, what happened there?
Yeah. It's funny you say that, because when I was watching it, I could not believe how many details. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh, I remember the dad. He makes this weird drink. Like, it's like orange juice and he puts an egg in it. And I remember even as a kid being like, what is he doing? Like, just a lot of details like that. But it's you know, it's a little messy, but by the end you're just like, it's a beautiful notion. It's a beautiful story.
Well, there we go. That's what Brian thought of Gran Turismo.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't even expect to talk about Neverending Story. But no, Gran Turismo, which, by the way, I did not know that this was a true story until I saw the trailer. You know, basically it's like, all right, so Gran Turismo is this game on PlayStation, and it's designed to not play like necessarily the most thrilling, crazy Mad Dash racing game. It's supposed to emulate truly what it's like to be behind the wheel in, you know, a F1 race or whatever sort of race Gran Turismo happens to be. I don't know. I'm not a race guy, but so it's very, very realistic, and the players who are into it are really learning how to operate cars using these controllers or these steering wheels that they buy. And so Nissan and PlayStation had this competition for players to, you know, play the game. Whoever did the best, they get to actually learn how to race and compete in a honest to goodness race behind the wheel of a car. And when I saw this trailer, I was like, oh, that's a funny idea. And then when it was like based on a true story, I was like, what? Like, they let a kid get behind the wheel of a car? Like, you know, like professionals get injured or worse in these sorts of races. But so yeah, I was like, interesting idea. I'll say the movie is pretty good. It's, you know, it's
so what's, I mean, this is Neil Blomkamp.
Neil Blomkamp, District 9, most famously. Elysium, right? Which I never saw.
Which I liked.
Okay. Oh, okay.
I like Elysium. I hated Chappie, which I think you didn't like either.
Yes, Chappie. Yeah. Yeah, we were not fans of that one.
No.
But this is like, I can't say it rises up to anything particularly great.
Mm-hmm.
However, we talk about this a lot. There's just this inherent thing that sports films have where it's just baked into the cake. I mean, you are going to root for the underdog to do well. Like, it's just the formula, and it works every time. And so I would say it was an enjoyable enough time. I don't think it's something that's we're gonna revisit or destined to become a classic or anything. But when you get toward the second half and the character is racing and the professional racers are saying you shouldn't be here, but you know how good he really is, like you are rooting for him, like show them all. So if you're looking for that, like on a Friday, like I want to see a sports film I haven't seen, the racing is filmed, I will say this, the racing is filmed incredibly well, and it's noticeable that they went to great lengths to actually film cars. Like you can tell that it's not a lot of visual effects. Just in all sorts of films now, just with cars crashing and stuff, it's like, well, they're, for whatever reasons, sometimes safety, sometimes just to save a buck. I don't know. Like it just doesn't look visceral anymore. But this movie did really capture the thrill of like a race. And it's worth noting that it was cool that they went out and did that. So if you check it out, I'd be curious what you think. It's like a tepid, like, yeah, when it was over, I was like, we were both, Federica and I, like, yeah, you can't help but root for someone to win a race. So there's that. Sure. But the overall, it was like, there's a love interest that you're like, why is this here? It just, right. It serves no purpose. And I didn't even really believe it. It's, so all that stuff, I wish it had added up to more, but the racing itself is fun.
Well, and you got David Harbour in there, and gosh darn it, how can we not just like David Harbour?
I mean, he's doing his grizzled, I didn't want to be here today, but gosh darn it, kid, I think you can do it. Kind of.
He's Hugh Jackman in Eddie the Eagle.
Yes. Yes.
Not to be confused with Hugh Jackman in Chappie.
Wow, I forgot almost everything about Chappie except that that insufferable duo.
Oh my God! Yeah, Ninja and something or other. Right?
What's their name? Yeah,
the rap duo.
They have a name. I can't think of what it is. But it's like that was one of those things. Like if you're with them, then maybe there's a chance for you with this movie. But if you cannot get into these characters, like you are, there's no room for you here. Like
it was Ninja and Yolandi, and they're like they have a name, right? The group.
Yeah, I can't think of what it is. I remember her song even because someone sent me their video where it's like, I like you a lot. So I don't know. And she has like all black eyes and it's meant to look like a scary thing.
Yeah. Anyway, Diane Ward. That's the
yes. With apologies to any Diane Ward fans who are listening.
No, Hugh Jackman was like the angry Christian guy.
Wow, dude, I don't remember any of this.
I just found it so insufferable where it's like, oh, he's Christian. He's so bad.
Yeah, so it's like he must not be. The machine doesn't have a soul.
Yeah,
or something like that.
Very awkwardly inserting his faith in a way that's like, all right, we get it. Like,
yeah,
come on.
You're bringing it back now, but yeah. And I wish you hadn't.
Okay, so Gran Turismo you liked better than Chappie. I think that's
most definitely. Just like a perfectly okay sports film.
And sometimes okay is okay.
Honestly, I didn't, it did the trick. We wanted to see it. We saw it and we were like, hey, all right.
I think when I think of racing movies of the last like 10 years, Rush and Ford versus Ferrari are like top tier for me.
Actually, oh man, I'm gonna sound like an idiot. I don't remember what that race is. That Le Mans, right? It goes for like 24 hours or whatever. Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. When that happens in Gran Turismo, and then I immediately like whipped my head over to Federica and I was like, "Oh, we got to watch Rush." Yeah, like fantastic. If you're looking for a race movie, watch Rush.
So good. It really like, and it's like people haven't heard of it.
It's amazing. I know.
Yeah. And it's like, no, you've got a really good movie waiting for you.
Yep. Yeah. Really great characters. I mean, it's a true story, but great characters, great acting, great racing. It's a great movie.
That's what I'm saying, man. Ford vs. Ferrari and Rush, that's a pretty good double feature right there.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It's time for another season of The Palmetto Porch, an original podcast from Discover South Carolina. I'm Devin Whitmire. Join me as I get to the heart of what makes South Carolina such a great place to visit by speaking to the locals who make it so special. Premiering December 5th, find The Palmetto Porch wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information about our show, visit scpalmettoporch.com.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, you know, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18 plus.
Well, here's a couple movies both of us have seen.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, let's talk about Dumb Money.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is about the famous the great GameStop debacle from about 2.5 years ago.
Have we talked about this, by the way? This sort of thing where something happens this week, and then by Christmas we're watching like the film adaptation of it. I mean, this is very recent, you know?
Yeah.
Like 2021, and we're in 2023 right now.
Yeah, I mean, like The Big Short, it took, you know, about 8 years for that movie to emerge.
Right.
And this is like that on fast forward. And I think if anything, this movie has the misfortune of sort of it's going to prompt comparisons to The Big Short.
Yeah, sure. Although I appreciated it didn't go like all snark.
Yes, so I was going to bring that up. Like I think that the comparisons are unwarranted, and I feel like people who are expecting something like that are going to be like, "Well, I wanted that," but I was like, "Well, I'm glad it wasn't trying to do that," because you know there's whatever Adam McKay does, and then there's people trying to do what Adam McKay does.
Yeah.
And this didn't do that, although it really breezed through a lot of these events in a way where the thought I had was like, if you're not familiar with this, either having read about it or lived through it, will you get it? And I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I told you that I was going to see it, and thankfully you told me that you watched a Netflix, what would you call it? I mean, it had like 3 episodes, the series, I guess. Yeah. I think it was called Eat the Rich, the GameStop saga.
That's right.
And so I went in having watched that, and I don't know now. I can't separate what I would not have understood from the film, but it was very helpful.
Yeah.
Giving like a timeline, and yeah, I found that helpful as an aid to watch this. But
I think so, just in terms of like the cast of real life characters involved and stuff. I mean, there's a lot, you know, there's stuff about the Robin Hood douchebag, whatever his name is.
Yes.
He's played by Sebastian Stan in the movie, where I'm like, had I not seen Eat the Rich, I would have been out to sea with this guy. That
is a very good point, because when I was watching the movie, I did have like kind of a boo kind of attitude, but that was coming from the Netflix doc.
Yeah.
He might have even been kind of likable because he was Sebastian Stan.
Right. Yeah.
A little like, what? Oh, like a little floppy and aloof, you know, kind of a thing, which
that's right.
From the other thing, I didn't find him that way at all.
No. But that being said, I thought it was interesting that the story is framed around these various characters who got in on, and for the people who are wondering what the whole GameStop thing, basically, there were a bunch of hedge fund people were trying to short GameStop, which, if you know what a short is, just watch The Big Short, by betting against it. And so you had like everyday folks who were like, well, we're going to buy up GameStop stock because screw those rich assholes.
Mm-hmm.
That's the gist of it. And they frame the story around Roaring Kitty. That's the name, right?
Yeah.
Roaring, who the Keith The hell's his name? I just call him Keith Kitty, but that's not
Keith
his name.
Gill.
Keith Gill, thank you. Who's played by Paul Dano in this movie, and he is so good.
Yeah. He's a likable character. Paul Dano's very likable in this. Yeah.
It's just everything they do to construct that character is kind of brilliant. And I don't know if that's what the real Keith Gill is like, but I loved the Dano version. I also like that America Ferrara is here playing her character. I'll just say, because this is the character America Ferrara plays.
That's really funny. Yeah, but I did enjoy her. Just to add,
let's just call her harried middle class woman just trying to make ends. That's pretty much, whether Barbie or Superstore or this, that's her character, and she's good at playing that character.
Agreed. And what I'll just add as you're calling her out, I think the Netflix doc does a good job of explaining what happened, and this one goes through what happened, but it is a lot more about the people who are experiencing this.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Right? And so you get these different perspectives of like college students, or like you said, like a nurse who's, has debt, and not only their relationship to this phenomenon and trying to make the stock go up and to screw these hedge funds people, but also their relationship to Roaring Kitty. And like, that guy meant, right? Like who he was and how he was sort of became this leader to these people, and someone that they were like, well, if he's doing this, we will continue to do this, which I didn't know so much about.
Which, when you think about it, like what a weight to carry on your shoulders if you're Keith Gill.
I know. It was, I mean, speaking of like sports films, but I was biting my nails when it was showing like their bank accounts, and then it would go up, and I'm like, okay. Like,
get out.
Yeah, get out. Like, no, like I'm really rooting for these people to win and then get out,
Yeah. It's, I think that there's also the guy who works at GameStop was played by Anthony Ramos.
Yes.
I liked him. By the way, he's the lead in the new Transformers movie, which I know you haven't seen, but
I haven't seen that
yet. He's been omnipresent the last couple months. But I went with Hamza, my oldest, and as we were driving home, he had just seen Big Short in the last couple months, and we were just talking about this, and I was like, the problem with the system is that, like, even something like this, the GameStop phenomenon, something like this happens and then it can never happen again.
Yes.
Right. And I'm like, think about the fact that we have like the Gabe Plotkin character, who he's a hedge funder. He's played by Seth Rogen, and he's like, I lost $1 billion today. Right.
Yeah.
At some point, because during the course of the whole thing that's going on. And I was like, we have a system where you have people who can lose $1 billion in a day, and for them, that's nothing.
Or they will have Ron Swanson bail them out.
Yes, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, they can lose all this money. And when I say Ron Swanson, it's
Nick Offerman.
Nick Offerman is playing the guy.
Ken Griffin.
But yeah, it's like they can lose, and then someone will give them an extra life, like a video game. But
meanwhile,
you have these, yes, exactly.
Average folks, if average folks for whom $1,000 is the difference between whether they have a house to live in or not.
Yep.
And I'm like, there's something fundamentally screwed up there.
Yeah.
And no, this is not one of my anti-capitalist rants. I'm not anti-capitalist.
No, but the system is broken. It's rigged, or I should say. And like, you could feel it. I don't know about you, but in my screening, I went late at night, just the only time I could kind of catch it, like maybe 10 p.m. or something. And I was surprised how many people were in there, first of all. But there was like energy in that room. I mean, you could I could feel people seething and getting angry, like certain characters. Like, I heard people mumbling and saying things, and just couldn't help but just be like, It's, yeah. And it made me wonder. I was like, I wonder if these guys were part of this. Like, if they, to my surprise, I told my brother that I saw the film, and he goes, "Did you know that Mom bought GameStop?" And I was like, "What?"
Wow.
Yeah. I called my mom. I was like, "Diamond Hands."
She's like, "Pardon me?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, she's like, "Ape strong together, Brian."
Wow.
No, she didn't say that. That'd be hilarious, though. She did.
That would be so funny.
But I did enjoy that part of it too, where it was showing. I mean, it wasn't just some guy on YouTube saying all these things and helping these people along. It was also, it became this weird Reddit subculture movement, right? So there was this whole memification of it, and like some of it's like wildly ridiculous and maybe even inappropriate. And so you have these Wall Street people being like, "Who the hell are these people?"
It just can't penetrate it. It's so deeply within its own memes, you know.
Yes.
The thought I had is that in terms of Seth Rogen's career chronology, like 10, 12 years ago, he would have been in the Pete Davidson role.
Yes. Wow.
Yeah,
you're so
now
right.
He's the hedge fund guy.
That's so funny. Yeah, that's
right?
Very true.
He'd be the guy sitting in the back seat smoking pot, whatever, right?
Yeah, he has had the most interesting career, hasn't he?
Well, the fact that he's still around, man, he's like Lawrence Fishburne in Matrix Reloaded. He's like, we are still here.
But I mean, like starting. I mean, he was like he's like a teenage stand-up, and then he Freaks and Geeks, and of course knocked up, and he was like kind of stoner guy, and then it's like he makes Green Lantern, but he's like stoner guy Green Lantern, and
Green Hornet.
Green Hornet. I'm sorry, but now he's kind of like doing these sorts of roles. And he's also like an entrepreneur. He has his like weed company, he took what he loved and turned it into a company, and they're like,
if you hadn't said it, I was going to be like, is it a weed company?
Yes, it's called Houseplant. It's basically like Supreme for like weed products. So it's like overpriced. I mean, it looks,
of course it is.
It looks good. I get it all over my, my Instagram stuff, but it's like ashtrays, because he's really into pottery too. But did you know this about him, by the way? He's like a huge pottery nut. And so he took the pottery, he took the weed, and he made a company. And
pottery and pot, two great tastes, great together.
But I have to stand back and be like, dude, he was true to himself, and he has endured, and he has grown into all these different sorts of things, and I find it pretty amazing. I
agree with you.
Yeah.
So it's a thumbs up from me on Dumb Money. I did enjoy it, but like I said, I feel like maybe not to the same extent that The Big Short like really stops and explains it, but I think a little bit of just slowing down and maybe explaining some of this terminology might have been helpful for a lay person who's just coming in completely cold. But then I also say, I wonder how wide the audience for a movie like this is also.
I don't know.
Like you have to imagine people who are going to watch it or already have some degree of understanding of what went on.
Yeah. And I mean, it's relatively easy to understand what it is, but it is nice to understand the how a little bit. But I also got to call out Craig Gillespie, right? The director. He's been
that's right.
Quickly, one to watch for me, at least. I mean, I, Tonya was the one where I was like, who is this guy? And because I love that movie. And then Cruella, which I liked, but I mean, visually, I thought it was great. And, this, I don't know. Just interested in what he does.
He did that John Hamm movie, $1 Million Arm. Have you seen that?
I think I have, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I liked that.
Yeah.
I thought that he did another thing called The Finest Hours with Chris Pine, which I didn't like as much, but definitely eclectic. You can't say that he's got one style. He tends to bounce all over the place.
Yeah. Wait. Oh, he did Lars and the Real Girl. Wow.
Lars and the Real Girl, right? Yeah,
which I liked.
And Pam and Tommy. He directed.
Pam and Tommy. Yeah.
Yeah. Which that's where you get Rogen and Sebastian Stan.
Yep.
Well, hey, here's another one that is out in theaters right now. It is The Creator.
Oh man.
Yeah, so this is
I'm so excited to talk about this one.
This one we've been waiting to talk about. Yeah, so this is the new Gareth Edwards joint. He of Rogue One and Godzilla. I don't think he's done anything since Rogue One.
I don't think so.
Right. So definitely takes us. He's like the opposite of Ridley Scott.
Yeah.
Rogue One, which was 2016, and then 7 years later, we have The Creator, which is a new sci-fi film that he wrote as well. stars John David Washington as the main character. We got a pretty good cast in here, though.
Oh yeah.
Gemma Chan, Allison Janney, Ken Watanabe. This is a beautiful film, I think, not merely in terms of the effects work, which is virtually seamless.
Incredible.
But I mean, Gareth Edwards, and this is something you and I have talked about before. We did our Rogue One commentary track. We were really like lavishing praise on his framing of shots, and is really just. I mean, he has an artist's eye.
Mm-hmm.
And I put this on the shelf with any of your like iconic visual sci-fi movies. I mean, speaking of Ridley Scott, I think I would put it up there with Blade Runner.
Absolutely in the conversation with Blade Runner in terms of like
in
vision.
terms of visuals.
Yep.
Yes,
And execute. Yeah.
But ... I think this is, back in the early days of our show, we used to do this more thumbs up with an asterisk.
Yes.
I think this is the quintessential thumbs up with an asterisk movie.
100%.
Right.
I entirely agree.
Because when I think of the movie, I remember the visuals, but like, what is it about?
I think I agree with what I think you're saying. I wanted to feel more.
Yes, that's right.
There's not a lot of connective tissue between a bunch of amazing ideas.
Yeah, and we were talking about Chappie earlier. I mean, I actually found it very similar to that, in that there is a vision behind this.
Yeah.
But kind of the same with that movie, where it's like, I'm not tracking with what you're trying to say.
That's a good point, because I mean, it's about AI, right? And it's about robots wanting to be free, and a lot of humans saying, well, you don't even, every emotion, everything you're thinking, it's just code. It's just programming.
That's
right. And you're right. Like, the movie never really goes deeper than that those two sides have different feelings about it.
Yeah, it felt a little bit like a feature-length extrapolation of that Animatrix short, The Second Renaissance.
Yeah.
And again, the visuals are amazing. I think the way and really what I liked was how you had these tableaus where Edwards would film shots with effects in them, but he wouldn't linger on the effects, and that made it just feel more like just normal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's a very grounded, like, it really feels like someone holding a camera on a beach, capturing this amazing, ship in the air that's shooting down these beams of light. Like, it doesn't look like a visual effects shot. It looks like someone somehow captured this in real life. And it's staggering. It's stunning. I don't know. I can't name any other film in several years where I've been like, my jaw dropped at the vision, at the effects. Yeah.
I think a couple problems I had. I think that the central character, John David Washington, I like John David Washington. I think he's fine in this. I think the character is kind of thin.
And I would say that I think it doesn't help that I think he can be a little wooden.
I agree with that. Yeah.
In Tenet, he's like a little flat. And I think somehow it works because everything around him is, I don't know, somehow it's okay. But like in this one, I feel like, yes, the problem starts with the character's a little thin. But then if you put someone that had a little more spark to them, it might just inherently add. And unfortunately, I don't think he's adding a lot to the little that's there.
I mean, the idea is that he's an undercover. Basically, you have a situation where human beings created AI, they relied on AI, and then there was a nuclear attack, which was blamed on AI, thus leading to America going to war with AI.
Mm-hmm.
Again, very Matrix, and you're on board with that. And John David Washington is like this undercover American operative who forms a relationship with a community of like mixed AI and human beings.
Right.
That's like the prologue.
Yeah.
And essentially it's cut to 5 years later. He's pulled back into the game because of various reasons. And this is in the trailer. He comes across this girl, this child who is an AI, and he sort of finds himself in this position where he has to protect her even though he's not supposed to, right? That's the gist of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm fine with that, but what I'll say is that the film then introduces this new piece of information tying them together,
Mm-hmm.
that I was like, well, I didn't need that.
Yeah.
And that made it weaker for me.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you've seen this story before, and that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it again and it doesn't work. But like, you want the sort of reluctant father figure. I mean, this is like Last of Us. It's like so many things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the child, and like, against all odds, they become a unit,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of what this is. But I didn't feel Last of Us TV show was good, but I mean, the game, I was really emotionally invested in that. And I wish I had felt even half of what I felt with that game with this version of that story.
Yeah. That said, I enjoyed seeing Allison Janney just being a freaking asshole. That was fun.
Yeah, she's good. She's good.
She's chewing the scenery with a plum. Ken Watanabe, I just like seeing him and stuff in general.
Yep.
So it's a movie I could see myself watching scenes from. Just to sort of take in the visuals again. It's not. I can't imagine I'll be watching it the whole way through anytime soon.
No, I could see it at some point, maybe, because again, I'm such a visuals are a huge part of my movie watching experience, and that's why I think I can rewatch things as much as I can. And this is definitely one that I know I would enjoy looking at again. And I mean, it's fine. The stories, like you said, it's a thumbs up with an asterisk.
I like the little stuff about how like people donate their face scans so that AI can, and I mean that, like, that's what I was interested in. It's sort of like, what is this, like, because the movie doesn't really answer that, like that idea of like, it's kind of like with Blade Runner, right? Are replicants real?
Mm-hmm.
Quote unquote. It's trying to do some similar stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like Blade Runner is more successful at tackling a lot of the same questions.
I agree. But yeah, I could definitely see myself just wanting to look at this movie again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just bursting with ideas. I mean, you have those bombs that have like arms and legs and like run to their targets.
Oh, that's great. What a cool sequence.
That was like, wow. Yeah. What an idea.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing I will say. I really appreciate the world building that's in service of just this movie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, we're not trying to set up, the streaming series and the prequels and the sequels, and no, it's just this is the story. It's done,
Right.
And more and more, I'm appreciative of movies that do that. We talked earlier this year about 65 with Adam Driver.
Oh yeah.
And not that I would compare them. I mean, they're doing different stuff, but that was something I really liked about that. I was like, it's just this thing. It's this 90-minute thing. It's it engages to whatever extent it needs to, and then we're done.
Yep.
So there we go. That's us on The Creator.
I want to say real quick, just because we're gushing so much about the visuals, and something that I found really cool and inspiring was, as all these movies now are costing like $300 million, right? I mean, right. I think this one, was under 100 million.
It was right around 100. Yeah, that's right.
Which, I mean, those other movies need to sit down and take notes. I mean, this looks like a $300 million movie. And on top of that, I was listening to an interview with Edwards, and they shot this movie on a Sony camera you can buy in the store for like $4,000.
Amazing.
And, I mean, that's, obviously that's a bit of money, but that is realistically achievable. You know what I mean? Like that's, if people were to pull their money, like a bunch of film students would pull their money together, they could get the same camera and make a movie that this guy made one of the most visually impressive movies I've seen in many, many years. And that's just, I love that. I love how it makes it not feel so far away. It's not like you have to have some sort of like red camera that costs like $30,000 or have a studio backing you up. You know, you can get, cameras are getting closer and closer and closer. And the product, I mean, if this is the product and you can go out there with your idea and shoot something like this, I think that's awesome.
The only question I have is, if you have a bunch of film students pool their money together, how do they decide who gets the camera on what days?
Well, you know, Sunday? You have one on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Sunday's determined by a random number generator.
What about Sunday?
Yeah.
Well, there we go. Okay, thanks for that, Brian.
Yeah.
Those are our thoughts on The Creator, but we will be back with some more thoughts on a movie that's coming up soon, right after this.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. It's a thing. And now the truth is out there. I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun. Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from with new games released each week. You can play for free anytime, anywhere. And each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, you know, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
And we are back, Brian.
Happy to be back.
Happy to be back. You know who else is about to be back?
Oh, who's that, Zyke?
Why, it's Jason Momoa as one Arthur Curry, a.k.a. Aquaman.
Are you sure? Are you sure he's back? I've heard rumors of him being back.
This is very funny to me because, yes, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is due to debut in December. I believe it's coming out December 20th, so just before Christmas. And this is the last movie of the whatever's in the barrel for DC Pictures or whatever it's called.
Yeah. Right, what is it called? Is it the cinematic universe, or what's the new universe going to be called?
I think they're calling it the DCU.
Okay.
As compared with the DCEU.
Ah, got it.
Which I don't know about you, but I'm saying all of that, and I'm like throwing my hands in the air, like I don't know, whatever.
It's funny actually, because when I said "got it," I was like, "Do I got it?"
Yeah, I don't
just saying "got it."
Anybody got it.
Words, and I heard them. Yeah.
Now, the trailer for Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, it just dropped recently. So I want to, first of all, let's pause. Let's play some of the audio from this trailer, and then we'll talk about it.
4 years ago, I was basically unemployed. A wanderer with no home. But now, I'm a husband and a father. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't know how you did it, Pops.
My job was a little less stressful than yours.
Oh yeah, I finally got a job. I'm the king of Atlantis. 500 million people from every known species in the sea call this place home. But that doesn't mean they all like me. I'm gonna kill Aquaman and destroy everything he holds dear. I'm gonna murder his family and burn his kingdom to ash.
He must be stopped, or a global meltdown is imminent.
All right. I feel like a lot of people have no idea this movie's coming.
Yeah, well, it's you and I.
That's
I'm
true.
following the making of and all that.
You and I were plugged in to some extent, but it's very funny to me because just a couple of days ago, you and I we got a text from Sean Coyle, our departed co-host on this very program, and he was like, "Hey, there's a new Aquaman movie coming." I had no idea, and I was like, "Man, if there's ever like a bellwether."
Yep.
Or like the average moviegoer, which I think I would put Sean in that boat, right? Like he watches movies. He's not like, not super plugged in. I'm like, well, that seems like a problem to me is the point I'm making.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
And the one thing I'll say is I've seen the trailer. I liked the first Aquaman. I don't see anything in this trailer that has me like, oh man, I can't wait to see this.
Well, I still I've only seen Aquaman 1 once, and it was a little bit, I've said this before in the show, a little under duress to get to the show in time to talk about it with you.
Sure.
And I remember feeling about that one how I think you felt about this trailer.
Okay.
I was like, yeah, stuff. Like I was like, yeah, I don't know. I didn't feel anything. Like it's stuff. And I've thought, I bet if I went back, I'd probably enjoy it a little bit more, but I've just not felt compelled to. And when I saw this trailer, I was like, there is nothing for me here. I mean,
okay. Oh, okay. You did feel that way. Okay.
I'm not saying it even looks bad. I'm just like this.
No, I get it.
This is the epitome of this is for someone else. Like there's just nothing here that piques my interest or makes me think I have to see that or anything about the character, anything about the story. It just looks like stuff. And I'm like, man, I hope people enjoy it, but it's just not, I don't see anything here for me.
See, I mean, I see that as kind of the underlying problem here is, first of all, they waited 5 years.
Yeah.
To come out with this. And sell no wine before it's time, but I can't imagine they needed that. I mean, okay, there was like the pandemic in the middle, which let's stipulate that. But they kept kicking this can down the curb, and I feel like they did it under the assumption that, well, Aquaman made $1 billion.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, people will wait to see this. And I'm like, I think you might have missed your window. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question because it wasn't a moment. I will give it credit where I think Jason Momoa is very charismatic. It was a different setting, so there's something kind of exciting about that. But was there enough there to feel like, oh, give me more?
Mm-hmm.
And then like you said, then 5 years later, that's a long time. And then on top of that, I mean, DC isn't doing itself any favors by saying that basically anything that's happening up until this movie doesn't matter, for moving forward, which there were many problems afflicting the Flash film, but that seemed to be one of them where it's like, well, if this doesn't matter by next year, then whatever.
Yeah, I for sure. I mean, this year between Shazam and the Flash not performing, I think Blue Beetle probably, I think relative to its budget, it's probably did okay, but it's not a smash hit.
Right.
Even though you and I both ended up enjoying that one.
That's a charming movie. Yep.
I think so. Yeah. And I think Aquaman.
No, sorry. So I was gonna say it's not changing the game or anything, but it's doing the thing, and it was charming.
Yes, and I have a feeling Aquaman 2 cost substantially more than Blue Beetle.
Yeah,
and I don't know. I just don't. I don't know that there's a groundswell of enthusiasm for a new Aquaman movie. So I am kind of like, you can only be like, oh, our new thing is coming for so long before you have so many flops behind you that it stifles interest in the new thing. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. And
right?
That's fascinating though. How do you go from $1 billion to people being like ho hum about a sequel? I mean, what time and all those things out, out of the equation. I mean, what do you think that is? I mean, did people enjoy showing up to a new flashy thing, but do you think they don't have feelings for this world? Or I mean, what?
Well, for me, the red flag was earlier this year when Shazam 2 just kind of tanked.
Which the first one I think was pretty well liked.
Pretty well regarded. I know you and I liked it. And I mean, it's just people didn't show up, right? So even on the back of a well-regarded first one, there wasn't enough residual interest to get people to come back for the next one. And I don't know why. I think you and I we view all the DC stuff from a perspective. Oh, well, there's the Snyder this and there's that. Like we know all the under the hood what's going on. I don't know if your average person is paying attention to that.
Sure.
Right. And we know the Batman did pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually genuinely curious. Will the Batman 2 do well?
Me too.
You know, I don't know. So we'll see. I know James Gunn has been batting away, questions online. He said something like, "Oh, in the new DCU, Blue Beetle will be the same, and John Cena will still be Peacemaker, and da. But this other stuff won't." And I'm like, man, DC having just absolute confusion surrounding a reboot is the most DC thing, because as somebody reading the comics most of my life, I've lived through like 4 different DC reboots.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's always, so wait, this counts, but this doesn't. So wait, this issue of Batman is still canon, but that's just what happens when you read DC.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, at least it's on brand.
Isn't it funny? I mean, I think people at least understand that that's a thing now, thanks to Marvel. Yeah. But it is funny. I mean, back in the day, it was like, hey, we're getting a new Batman movie. It's like, well, it's Val Kilmer now. All right.
That's, I'll be honest. I kind of miss that.
Yeah, it was so much simpler.
It was, right? I mean, Batman Forever, we've talked about this. Like that was originally intended to be a sequel to Batman and Batman Returns.
Mm-hmm.
You can agree with that choice or dislike, but that's just what it was. It never even occurred to me that it wasn't a sequel.
Yeah, it was just another Batman movie.
It's just another Batman. It's just how it was with James Bond, right? A new actor doesn't mean it's a whole new canon. And I'm like, even James Bond is in the position now. It's like, oh, we gotta nuke the joint before we can start over again. And I'm like, well, it didn't used to be like that.
Yeah.
And I feel like Marvel is kind of doing kind of the same thing to themselves, where they're writing off so many of these OG characters that, obviously now there's like this question mark of like, well, what's going to happen with the MCU without X, Y, and Z characters, and I think those are legit. Those questions are more legitimate now than they were maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It's been interesting because like there's the new season of Loki is out right now, and I've seen the first 4, and I really liked it. But again, it's like I don't sense a lot of like enthusiasm for it.
Not like the first one.
Yeah.
I feel like the first one had a lot of buzz, but
I think partly people are just burning out on big franchises.
Yeah.
So somewhere out there, Martin Scorsese is getting the last laugh,
Right. That's yeah.
But I think that's a factor too, honestly. I think people are just kind of franchised out.
Yeah. It's funny. We saw the Marvels trailer before the creator also.
Yeah.
And I leaned over to my brother because after each trailer we were looking at each other and either yaying or naying, like if we would see it. And the Marvels played and I leaned over and I was like, I sort of with Marvel, it feels like that thing where like people who aren't very religious, but they still go to church on Christmas every year. Like that's how I am, I think, now with these movies.
So
like I can't say I'm very passionate about them, and I'm not really even keeping tabs or loving them or revisiting them. But it's like, oh, Marvel's November. Okay, yeah. I'll be there.
I mean, that's good. Well, even like Ahsoka, which just ended. Right. I mean, it's like, and admittedly, I haven't watched it past the first 3 episodes just because I've been busy. But there's this sense of like, yeah, it's just another Star Wars thing,
I know. Isn't that so sad?
Right. And I'm like, man, we got like Hayden Christensen is back as Anakin.
I know.
And that's so cool. But like, it's lost its event status, right?
I know. And I think for me, yeah, it might just be it's too diluted at this point, where it's like Mandalorian I like fine, but
Yeah.
it started, I actually haven't even watched season 3 yet.
Me either.
And then Boba Fett was okay, but I'm not even
Mhm.
sure they knew what they were doing with
Yeah.
it, and then like Obi-Wan I know you were a little higher on it, but I didn't really, to me, it didn't feel like the best version of what it could be. So
Well, Obi-Wan is sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but
Yeah.
but Obi-Wan, that 6 episodes should have been a 2.5-hour movie,
yes,
and it would have been gangbusters. So that you talk about diluting, it did not need to be a series. Full
no,
stop.
nope. It would have been so much stronger as a film. And then, so then I can't help but think like, all right, well, I would have never said this a couple of years ago, but now I'm like, I'll see what people say.
Yeah.
And so Ahsoka, I'm going to check out. Actually, I downloaded it for my trip, but because I'm excited that it's kind of back to that Jedi thing. Like I want to see the lightsabers again and all that. So I am excited that looks a little different, so I'll give it a shot, but yeah, it's a weird place for these big franchisees.
I think it's less about DC in general, in particular rather, but like just these big mega machines in general. I think people are sort of, I don't know, tired of is maybe not the wrong phrase, but ready for other stuff too,
Well, it's like if I could eat cake for every meal, would you do it? You're like, of course I would. And then you have cake for every meal, and then you're like, oh, I never thought I'd feel this way about cake. I'm not sure I want as much cake. You know?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. I am looking forward to having that discussion. That's for sure.
Yeah, maybe I'll check out the first one again, but or in the lead up to 2.
So for those of you waiting for a commentary track, might not happen.
Wouldn't it be hilarious if we did and you were all prepared, but then I was just talking about things that are on my mind, like I just use it as a platform to just, I don't know, chat about stuff.
Now, if anything, the conversation that we were just having really drives home the importance of writers in making us care about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the timing of this conversation is entirely apt because as we are recording this, we're in the aftermath of the writers' strike having been resolved.
Yep. New agreement is in place, and it seems that everyone in the WGA, I mean, I say everyone, but many are very happy with it. So it, let's see, it includes like minimum wage and compensation increases, increased pension and health funds, which of course are all important.
Residuals.
And what's interesting about that also is there's going to be, pay bumps for shows that are successful, right? That reach a certain level of success with viewership, which was something that was easily measured on network television because you had the Nielsen ratings, right?
Okay.
But with streamers, it was so closely guarded. They don't tell you how they measure these things or how their shows are even doing.
Right.
And so I think that was something that they didn't want to give up. And I have to imagine it has to do with, streamers are kind of struggling right now to figure out how to make it a profitable business. So they probably don't want people to know exactly what's going on behind the scenes. But apparently they reached some sort of deal where in confidence, they will share how well these things are doing with, I don't know who, but, and then using those confidential numbers that will result in pay bumps with writers. So that's good.
Well, and this just gets to the conversation that we've had on this show for many times over the last several years. And I've had this in my classes too, where it's like the streaming model has, I think, collectively been catastrophic in terms of how this stuff gets out there. And we see, I mean, the fact that the WGA agreement acknowledges that and really gets to the heart of like, we need to be looked after no matter what format this product is going out. Right. Because of exactly what we're saying, right? There was a sense before with, if it's over linear, like this many views, this many reruns, you make this much money. I mean, there's a sense, a season is this many episodes. So you're going to work for this long. With streaming, it's like, well, we're not going to tell you how many people are watching. You get paid the one time. You work for 4 weeks for 6 episodes or whatever.
Right. Less episodes than used to be. Yep.
Yeah, and it's just not a sustainable model for anybody, including the streaming services.
Yep. Yep. And that has to do, I mean, this goes back to the 2007-8 strike too, but I mean, when there's a new platform, like streaming, which is new, I mean, you can't just have it be the Wild West and not have any sort of rules or, systems for how that's going to work.
Yeah.
Like things had in the past. You can't just be like, oh, this is new and we're just not going to pay you residuals, or
Right.
we're going to give you pennies on the dollar. It doesn't, all that stuff has to be figured out. And it took a while, but it sounds like they figured something out that they can continue to build on in the future. And speaking of that, with new things and having to figure out how to govern those things and not make it the Wild West, AI, which was a huge point of contention with this negotiations. This was interesting. Did you read all about this? Basically, this is kind of interesting. Not exactly what I expected, but it said that studios cannot use AI they cannot use writers' work to teach their AI. Right. However, a writer can choose to use AI when performing writing services if the studio consents to this.
Right.
So I was like, oh, that's interesting. So it's in the mix a little bit, but it's up to the writer if they want to use it as a tool.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. But the studios can't require it either.
Yeah.
So
and I think the worry there was you would have a situation where somebody goes to ChatGPT and they'll be like, hey, give me an episode of Law and Order about a doctor who is harvesting organs, and then boop, 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 and then you hand it to somebody and be like, hey, tweak this, and they're not writing it, they're like a story editor or something. And
they're paid not as much because they didn't come up with the first draft or something.
That's exactly it. And so, I mean, this is a response to, the 07 writers strike, or excuse me, 07, 08, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when that agreement was reached, the guild membership got an email that was like, well, this isn't the best, but we're hopeful, that kind of thing. This time, this strike ends, it's like, hey, we got a great deal.
That's what it sounds like. It sounds like significant gains. And I've just heard other writers saying that this is also something sturdy to continue to build upon moving forward.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we're talking about streaming, right? And as we record this, we're days away from Frasier coming back.
Yeah.
Right. And that's going to be on Paramount Plus. And I look at a show like that and I'm like, why on earth are you doing that on a streaming service instead of on linear?
Sure.
Right. Like, I mean, the economics of this don't make any sense to me, because if you have it on linear and then it goes to streaming the next day, that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But how many people are going to subscribe to Paramount Plus just to watch the new Frasier?
Oh, it's on Paramount Plus?
Yeah. Paramount Plus.
I would have assumed it was like Netflix or something. Wow.
No. Yeah. I mean, is it really a driver?
I don't know, man. Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of Frasier. You know that. I love Frasier. I'm looking forward to watching it. I already have Paramount Plus.
Mm-hmm.
But how many new people are jumping on?
Yeah. I mean, for a 30-minute show that's going to be like 10 episodes, I don't know.
It doesn't make sense, right? Versus put it on whatever, CBS, I guess, since it's, if you want to have it vertically integrated, fine,
Right.
put it on CBS. People are going to tune in.
Yep.
People will watch it. So
I think that makes sense to me. I mean, sort of like what movies have sort of learned.
Yeah.
Where it's like, give it the theatrical, touch.
Yeah.
And give it a little shine and make it available one way.
Mm-hmm.
And then you maybe a little sooner rather than later than it used to be, you make it available somewhere else. And the people who want to check it out that way can check it out that way. It just,
I mean, Killers of the Flower Moon, I mean, it's an Apple movie.
Yeah.
But that's going to get a full court theatrical release.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's a little bit like the with Halloween, those films, the new ones, right? They were theatrical day and date, or at least the second and third one were on streaming at the same time, right?
I forgot about that. Yeah.
And I'm like, well, did that kibosh some of the desire to see it, because we're like, oh, I can just watch it online.
If memory serves, I feel like Halloween still did like okay, but you
Yeah.
have to think it would have done that much better just to make it even just a week.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's funny because the Exorcist reboot or whatever, the Believer, Exorcist Believer, it's in theaters right now,
Mhm.
and I guess it's underperforming because they were predicting it would open to something like 30 plus million. It's opening around 28 million, and I was fascinated that Universal paid 400 million for the franchise rights,
Yeah.
and I'm like, are you guys high? Like,
Yeah.
are you kidding me?
Yeah, I know. Same. I would have never guessed that 3 of those films would go beyond, say, 500.
Right.
Not even that. I would not have guessed that. So I don't know what they were thinking.
It's so, because the movie itself costs like 30 million.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, well then it's all, they'll be in the black before too long. Yeah, except for how much they laid out to own the franchise. I'm like, what is this franchise worth? It's one good movie
Yes.
and a bunch of not good movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't, this is what we were talking about earlier. Is there any real cachet among today's audiences for The Exorcist?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
And it's because then I was like, well, you've got your Halloweens and all those sorts of things, but those are a little more character driven. It's like, oh, Michael Myers, you can just plop him into anything, and you're showing up for him, right?
That's right.
This is like a weirder sort of hopping around to different characters, kind of doing the same thing. I assume, someone gets possessed, then they're not.
Brian, this is like because this is essentially Warner Brothers getting the rights for Morgan Creek. This would be the equivalent. Sorry, Universal got the rights, even though Warner Brothers released the original ones. This would be like Warner Brothers going to Universal and being like, "We'll give you $500 million for the rights to the Jaws franchise."
Yeah.
What are you, nuts?
Yeah.
Right. It's one good movie. That's it.
Yeah. And then maybe there's a curiosity factor with the first one, where it's still, I mean, that movie's not going to make, 100. Well, these days it's easy to say now because the box office has been so weird.
Yeah.
But looking at it lately, I mean, that movie's not going to make over 100 million.
Exactly.
And so then you still have to deal with 2 and 3, and then the shine is worn off.
That's right.
So,
I mean, this is the problem with streaming shows in general, right? Because the linear network model was a sturdy thing that worked for more than half a century.
Mm-hmm.
You air enough episodes on a network, and then you build up a kitty, and you sell those episodes into syndication, and that's how money gets made.
Mm-hmm.
It worked.
Yeah.
Tell me how streaming gets you there. Tell me how 10 episode seasons get you to syndication.
Yeah.
It's funny because over the last few weeks, but I've been sort of not binge watching, but I've been making my way through Chicago Med, which is the Dick Wolf produced procedural, and I had a hole in my heart, Brian, a Chicago based medical drama sized hole in my heart.
Yeah. After your ER
exactly
run. Yeah.
Which is crazy. By the way, between the end of ER and the start of Chicago Med, it's about 5 years.
Wow.
Which is weird, right? Like we think of ER as such a 90s thing, but I mean, it lasted, till almost 2010.
Yeah, that was to my surprise when you pointed that out to me.
Yeah. But anyway, I've been watching it, and it's fine, right? It's kind of what you're getting, and I like just putting on an episode. But my point is, they've got 8 seasons of this show.
Mm-hmm.
8 seasons with roughly 22, 24 episodes each. So by virtue of that, this is a show that it's going to get rerun forever, and that's how the economics make sense.
Right.
With streaming shows, again, like even long running streaming shows, how do they get to? They don't get to 100 episodes. Streaming shows don't get to 100 episodes.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh no.
Right? There's not a chance. So how do you keep it profitable in the long run, other than this is Netflix has Stranger Things, and if I ever want to watch Stranger Things, I can always go watch it. Okay, but your audience is baked in already.
Mm-hmm.
Your subscription base, And
I just with like a Chicago Med or something, you get advertisements.
That's right.
You get a unique sort of visibility where, Netflix, it's like everything feels sort of like flavor of the week, and then it gets absolutely lost in a sea of stuff, never
Mhm.
to be like, someone was on another podcast, they were talking about the Wes Anderson shorts,
Uh-huh.
and they were saying, I was looking for them and couldn't find them.
Wow.
Like I had to, it wasn't on my front page. I've watched other Wes Anderson movies. So, I mean, people like us, like we said, we're plugged in. We knew these were coming. I was anticipating this. And even I didn't know there was going to be 4 of them. And I was anticipating this. So imagine someone who's a casual, like, oh, I kind of like Wes Anderson and this thing's on Netflix. They might not even know it exists.
Right.
It's so some of the stuff doesn't even have a shot to live, not only be discovered, but to live on, like you're saying,
Well, we're trapped in the algorithm, and the algorithm is just feeding you whatever. And so for a lot of people, that just means Love is Blind or various versions of Love is Blind.
Right. Right. And I know this all sounds like we've probably had a conversation similar to this and complaining, but like you got to do something about it. So I'm kind of curious if some smart person at one of these companies is going to figure out a way to figure this out, to solve this issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. But that's a conversation we'll continue to have, I suppose. Why don't we take a short break? And then we're flipping the order in this episode a little bit, but I wanted to close the episode out with some of the listener letters we've gotten in the last month, just because it's been so long since we've done one of these regular shows.
Definitely.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
David's Bridal, where brides and bridesmaids get fabulously dressed. We let our friends pick out what we wear. Show off our dance moves. Obsess over every little detail. Hold your hand through it all. Smile bravely when it's time to let go. Make your dreams come true. The things we do for love. Only at David's Bridal.
When you wake up well-rested on a great mattress, everything becomes clear.
I do have a favorite child.
Things you missed when you were tired finally reveal themselves.
I use memes as a coping mechanism.
It's Mattress Firm's once-a-year sale and clearance. Get up to 60% off select Sealy, plus a free adjustable base, all with free and fast delivery. Deals this big won't last long, so don't miss out. The right mattress matters. We'll find yours. Restrictions apply. See store or website for details.
Okay, we're back. And like I said, Brian, a lot of stuff in the mailbag for us this month.
I love it.
So here's a note we got from Jeffrey Meisner, and he says the following. I agree with you both about Blue Beetle. I really enjoyed it, even if it wasn't groundbreaking. It's like with food. Sometimes you want a dining experience at a place with an interesting atmosphere, with unique, locally sourced food, but other times fast food really hits the spot.
Sure.
To my surprise, though, my 11-year-old son loved it. He turned to me at the end and said that was the best DC movie ever.
Oh, I love that.
That's what matters ultimately, right?
Yeah.
He says, I thought the movie was charming, but his reaction really made me love it. Also, Zachy said he and his nephew tapped out around the same time, and I was curious when that was. For me, it was early season 4. Oh, this is in regards to The Walking Dead. I'm not a horror/zombie guy, but I liked the human, what would you do element. By that point, though, I felt I had heard what they had to say on those themes, and it was just an exercise in horror going forward. Did Brian ever watch it? I missed it, if he said he did. Love the show. Thanks for the Lois and Clark track, too.
That's been very gratifying, by the way, how many people enjoyed the Lois and Clark thing. I didn't know if that'd be a little niche, but
yeah,
got a big response from that.
Yeah.
The Walking Dead thing, I'll say real quick. I think you might have loaned me some of the comics, and I really enjoyed them. And so then, yes, I did. I started the show. I definitely watched season 1. maybe watched season 2, but I just kind of it didn't have a pull on me, and I at some point just sort of dropped off. So I want to say it's probably somewhere in season 2-ish.
Yeah.
I dropped off.
My final episode where I just stopped watching was where they kill off Stephen Yeun's character.
I've heard that a lot, by the way.
I know it's very funny because for a lot of people that was kind of a drop dead point, literally, I guess. But definitely for me, it was like I had the thought where I was like, this is misery porn, and I just, the world is kind of shitty enough without spending an hour watching just misery.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and the thought I had was like, the way he's killed is particularly graphic, and I'm like, this character, he's like a friend,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to see that happen to my friend.
Yeah.
And so I was like, and I didn't look back in terms of watching it regularly. I would occasionally sort of like hit up Wikipedia and just kind of see where the show was at,
Yeah.
But I feel like I haven't really missed anything. So, that said, I did review the Fear the Walking Dead, the final season of that show. I reviewed that for the Wrap, so people can check that out.
Nice.
This is from Adam O, who says, I couldn't believe when the Lois and Clark commentary track popped into my feed.
Huh.
What blackmail material does Zachy have on Brian to get him to watch Lois and Clark? This one, I was just like, hey, how about this? And you were like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, it was a big nostalgia trip for me because, like I said in the commentary, I watched the show when it first aired, so I was kind of eager to go back because I have fond memories of it, and I also wanted to see, where superhero stuff is now. It's so mainstream and all the big budgets and whatnot. I was kind of curious to see what a superhero TV show looked like in the 90s. To my surprise, it looked great.
Yeah,
I thought.
Well, and I think me saying, hey, it's 90 minutes, I think you were like, go on.
Yeah.
That always helps. Adam continues, I had a big doofy grin on my face the whole time I listened. Like Zachy, I've been a huge Superman fan since I was about 4 years old. I remember watching the pilot that Sunday evening 30 years ago. That can't be right. I know. It's crazy. Much like many of my beloved TV shows and movies from my formative years, I've been introducing this one to my son, and we're getting close to wrapping up season 2. After that one, I agree with Zachy. The show drops off, but I'll probably keep watching with him just for the nostalgia dopamine kick. I'm so glad that Brian had fun watching it, and I would absolutely recommend to continue on, at least for the first 2 seasons. It made me doubly happy when Zachy paraphrased Michael Bailey, whose podcast From Crisis to Crisis is a must-listen for Superman fans. Yeah, I'll co-sign that. Lois and Clark had a ton of great guests over the years, but I'd like to point out that Leslie Jordan, who tragically passed away just about a year ago, had 2 guest roles, and those are the main reason I remain a fan of his. He played the Invisible Man in one of the first season episodes. I remember that. Michael Bailey and Jeffrey Taylor, they host a podcast called Superman From Crisis to Crisis, which is taking the character from just after Crisis on Infinite Earths to just before Infinite Crisis. So going from roughly 1986 to 2006, which coincides with the era that I was reading Superman comics. So it's definitely covering like my specific iteration of Superman. So definitely would recommend that to people.
Yeah.
Mark LaChance emailed us. He said, thanks for the Lois and Clark commentary. As a Superman fan, I was an avid viewer of this show when it originally aired. I also think it's hard to explain to younger listeners how much of a cultural icon Terry Hatcher was at the time.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in my sophomore year of college in 95, 96, when the show was at the height of its popularity, and Terry Hatcher was considered the hottest woman on the planet. At that time, my roommate and I heard from a fellow student who had worked in a video store that there was a movie called The Cool Surface in which Terry Hatcher was nude. My roommate and I went to every Blockbuster in Manchester trying to find this movie, only to discover that the only copy in the area was at a Blockbuster in Boston. Undeterred, we drove the hour south to Boston to rent this movie, which turned out to be pretty awful. It's billed as an erotic thriller, and it co-stars Robert Patrick from T2. Other than seeing the full Hatcher, I can't recommend it. Keep the great content coming.
That feels like such a 90s.
It really does.
Super bad / whatever adventure or something.
Now you go to Google, and in 2 seconds you see it, and you're like, eh.
It's so funny. It's so just the times have changed.
Yeah. The quest is gone.
Wait, by the way, speaking of like 90s erotic thrillers, I Was it Zorro?
Which is a comment Brian makes often. Usually.
This is a total tangent. But I one time I was talking to someone who represented people like writers, and I was just talking about what I do, and she was like, "So what's your thing? What's your specialty?" And I go, "Erotic thrillers," as a joke, and she took me deadly serious. And she goes, "Oh, well, like, what are those like?" And blah 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 blah. And I was like, "No. I'm just kidding. Do you know what erotic thrillers are?" She didn't. I was like, "Oh,
Wow.
okay, never mind."
That is a bygone era.
But what I was going to say, okay, so we talked about the movie Lambada.
Yes.
On the Zorro commentary, I believe, right?
That's right.
Which is sort of like an erotic-y VHS cassette thing we'd see at the video store growing up. And we were like, I'll speak for myself. I was like, the Lambada, is that something I have to learn someday as an adult? And I had lunch with a friend who is an editor this past week, and, hadn't seen her in a while. It was great, left. And then I went on IMDb because I was just curious about her credits and looking up all the older stuff she worked on. She worked on Lambada, the movie.
Well, I'll be damned. Look at that.
I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm 1 degree from Lambada, the movie.
Hey, that's put that on your business card, I say.
I
know. Here's a note we got from Kelly Boucher, and this is again about our Lois and Clark commentary, Brian. Just finished the Lois and Clark commentary. I absolutely loved the show when it originally aired, and rewatched part of it during the pandemic. Dean Cain is definitely my picture of Superman, and Terry Hatcher is Lois. Your thoughts on the glasses trope were great. I immediately remembered that Terry Hatcher hosted SNL during the second season. I remember this episode, by the way. The gag in her monologue was that she didn't recognize cast members with their glasses. Is that possibly the moment where society decided it was done with the trope? I think so, to be honest.
That's funny. That's a funny idea.
I remember that. Yeah. She says, I bought the glasses thing as a kid because I always felt that Clark's personality was the real disguise. I think most people just wouldn't believe their cubicle neighbor was dressing up in tights and flying around saving the world. Anyway, I enjoy the show. Thanks for making my commute fun. Kelly. Thank you, Kelly.
Oh, thanks, Kelly.
So here's the thing. I was thinking about how during the pandemic, iPhones have face scan where you could set it to recognize your face with the mask on.
Yes.
So in a world where that technology exists, Superman does not have a secret identity.
That is a very good point. Yep.
And I'm not saying Superman should not have a secret identity. I think he should, but I think we just have to squint past it and say, well, it's a conceit of the genre without which the whole thing falls apart. So we just have to live with it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I don't know what else you do.
Yeah. It's just one of those. It's funny how there are those certain things though where it's just so ridiculous, but it's like, no, that's part of the lore. Like that's why I'm going with this. You just go with it.
I think that John Byrne, who we've talked about before, he rebooted Superman. One of the things that he approached the reboot with in '86 was to say, when did Superman tell the world he has a secret identity? And what I mean by that is, there was all these stories in the 70s, 60s, 70s, into the 80s, where Lois Lane or whoever is trying to find Superman's secret identity. And you say, well, he's a guy who's showing his face. Why would you think, oh, he must be disguised as a human being?
That's a good point.
Right? Like you would just be like, oh, well, that's Superman. He's just going around helping people. He's Superman. And that's how a character like Clark can exist, because it wouldn't even occur to you that Superman has a secret identity.
That's a really good. His face is full on display.
There was a comic book. I think this was Superman #2 from the 80s. Again, this is a John Byrne thing where Lex Luthor finds out that there's some kind of a connection between Clark Kent and Superman, but he can't figure out what it is. So he has this computer analyze all this evidence and all this stuff, everything. He feeds it all in there, and the computer spits it out. Clark Kent is Superman. And Lex's lab technician is like, oh my gosh, of course, that makes all the sense in the world. Are you kidding? And Lex is like, no, you're fired. Get out of here and take this stupid thing with you.
I feel like I've seen that.
Yeah, because he's like, no one with Superman's power would ever deign to be just a regular human,
Right. Right, which is a very Lex point of view.
Exactly, right? So
Yeah.
I like that idea that, well, that's how it works, because nobody would even think that Superman has a secret identity.
Right,
You know?
right. I like that.
Here's one from Busha Bernie, who says, "This was a fun one. I watched the pilot when it first aired and recently on Max. Zaki, you mentioned it came on at the same time as Sequest DSV, and I still remember that as the siblings and I made the decision to watch Lois and Clark live while recording Sequest. Side note, do kids these days understand the significance of having a 4-channel four-head VCR so you can watch one show while recording something else on another at the same time? Yeah, it was fraught.
It was rough. It was rough,
Yeah.
kids.
She said, I watched the entire run of the show and I still lament now and then about the quality of season 1 versus the others. I'll get over it one day. I never thought of the pilot as a movie, but that makes sense. Another good Superman, quote, movie is the first few episodes of Superman the Animated Series, the 3-parter, The Last Son of Krypton. I will co-sign that as well. It's terrific. Anyway, looking forward to the next commentary. Do you know it's been 35 years since the release of Short Circuit 2? I'm just saying.
Zach,
Brian?
I am also just saying.
Hey, man, I'm down. I'm always down.
That would be fun. That'd be a fun commentary. I would love to do that.
I would be open to that.
That was for people who have not been longtime listeners, that was a very a touchstone childhood movie for me.
Yeah. And directed by Kenneth Johnson, by the way, he of The Incredible Hulk and V.
And you have interviewed him.
I interviewed him and I asked him about Short Circuit 2. I was like, my friend Brian Hall would kill me if I don't ask you about Short Circuit 2. And he was very kind to share some recollections from that movie.
I've always said if I came into like a ridiculous amount of money, like stupid money, like what's the first dumb thing I would buy? And it is Johnny 5. Probably a DeLorean and Johnny 5.
I love it. And here we go. This is from Jason Thorwall. He says, I was here at the beginning. You know, the episodes you beg people not to listen to. I soldiered on when 3 hosts became 2. That episode, when the only ad that played was for a Doomsday Prepper supply website, I chalked it up to the boys need to make a little coin for all this good work. When Zaki extolled the virtues of communism, I didn't! I said nothing. When Brian got married to avoid the long-awaited Star Wars commentary, I gave it a pass. I have not yet, Jason. I have not. But this unprovoked cramping on Bob Barker's fresh grave will not stand, I tell you. Your circulation department will be hearing from me in the morning when I call to cancel my well, please don't cancel your subscription. I did not crap on Bob Barker's grave. All I said was he hosted that show for 35 years, and I'm guessing for the last 25 of those years, he was probably kind of miserable, slowly dying inside.
I think you did actually suggest that he was interchangeable. Like, was he really? Did he really make enough of a mark to be like? Could it have been anyone? And I see. Actually, I do. I'm glad we're doing this because I am curious. We got a lot of response to that, and I remember. I think I defended him a little bit on the show, but I think I was so confused that you didn't feel that way that I was sort of like not sure if you were serious or not. Because Bob Barker, I'll speak for the people who've been writing all these emails and texts. When we were growing up, I mean, he was formative. I mean, it was like when you're home from school, when you were sick, you watched The Price is Right. You got Bob Barker with that really thin microphone and his, white hair, and he was great with guests. And then, summer vacation, I watched Price is Right with Bob Barker. Then I went outside and played. So I didn't know people didn't have that experience with him. So I'm kind of curious. I'm kind of curious to hear you talk to that. I mean, the response that you got.
All I'm saying is he was slowly dying inside anyway, and the rest of him just caught up. That's all. I'm
just gonna double down.
During the writer's strike, I don't know if I'm sure you know this. Drew Carey had just a tab at like a local restaurant.
Yeah.
and he was paying something in the line of $10,000 a week or a day or something ridiculous. Just basically saying, any writers who want to go there and eat, I'll cover your pay.
Yep.
And I was like, wow, what's Bob Barker done comparable to that?
Well, if it weren't for Bob Barker, we'd be swimming in cats in every city, right?
Other than spaying and neutering a bunch of pets, the man was a national treasure. He'll be missed. I have no strong feelings on Bob Barker. I was just sort of like positing, and I didn't realize I was uncorking sort of the Pazuzu level undercurrent of just absolute frustration. I have no strong feelings on Bob Barker, other than I would assume that he was beloved by many, and they miss him.
It has been kind of crazy though, right? I mean, there were a lot of responses.
Yeah, I people showing up at my house unannounced and just leaving a flaming bag of poo that says "for Bob." It's hurtful.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, the Happy Gilmore, amazing.
Yeah, a lot of people telling me the price is wrong, bitch.
Right.
So it's excessive. But of course, it's always sad when anybody who's beloved, as Bob Barker was, dies. That being said, I stand by my contention that of those 35 years, he was probably miserable for 25 of them.
Hey, you have your story, we'll have ours.
Except for when he briefly shook the hand of one Brian James Hall.
And I'll never forget it. I was truly starstruck.
I will go so far as to say that he never forgot it, and that might be the last image that flitted before his eyes before he left this mortal plane.
I hope then, if that is the case, that I was the embodiment of all the fans. I represented all the fans. The love directed toward him.
There we go.
Using my face is all.
So nothing but love, Bob.
Yep.
R.I.P. Well, I think that wraps up this episode. What do you think?
Yeah, man, this is a blast. I say it every time, but like, just when we get to the commentaries are great, but when we get to kick back and chit chat, I love this.
And we'll be back soon, because our next regular show, we will be talking about Killers of the Flower Moon.
Holy cow.
It's coming up.
Yeah. Wow. I'm very much looking forward to that. And that's 3.5 hours, I think.
Yeah. So that will not be a commentary track, but we'll have lots to say about it, though. But we will get back soon with a commentary track.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say what it is, but it's coming.
Yep.
So look forward to that. But if you have any questions or comments for us, if you're still mad at me about Bob Barker or anything else, you can always email us at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com. You can also hit like on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/moviefilmpodcast. If you're looking for me online, I am at Zachy's Corner. I'm still on Twitter, aka X. And although that friggin' place is just going down the tubes fast. Holy crap.
Is it? I mean, is it a weird sort of existence over there now?
I mean, it's just, from what I see, it's a bunch of white supremacists and movie fans. That's all that's left at this point, I read that Elon Musk plans to get rid of the block button, which I think was the magic bullet to make that site even better. Was getting rid of the ability to block, just.
It's just these choices that you can't help but laugh at, where it's like, yeah, that sounds like a bad idea. It's crazy.
It is sort of fascinating. So let's see where that is. But I'm on Instagram, etc. Over there as well. And you can find my writing at the San Francisco Chronicle, also at IGN. I have a piece up at IGN about NYPD Blue, celebrating 30 years of that show. And currently at the Chronicle, I have my review of Loki season 2. What about you, Brian? You're kind of relaxing now, aren't you?
Yeah, well, you can find my writing existing on Disney Plus. It is Young Jedi Adventures, and going all the way back. I've been talking about Puppy Dog Pals with people recently, and it's funny because even though that's sort of in the past in terms of my job, like, it still exists and kids are still finding it, and that delights me to no end because I absolutely love that show. So Young Jedi Adventures.
It's got a long tail, Brian.
Yes, it does. Longer than a pug's tail. Puppy Dog Pals and Young Jedi Adventures on Disney Plus.
There you go. And with that, on behalf of my partner Brian Hall, my name is Zaki Hassan. This has been MovieFilm 277. We will catch you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Welcome, friends. It's the MovieFilm Podcast. MovieFilm Podcast. Enjoy the show. Zaki and Brian are talking about the movies. MovieFilm Podcast on the radio.
David's Bridal, where brides and bridesmaids get fabulously dressed. We let our friends pick out what we wear, show off our dance moves, obsess over every little detail, hold your hand through it all, smile bravely when it's time to let go. Make your dreams come true. The things we do for love, only at David's Bridal.
If you or someone you know is having thoughts of suicide or experiencing a mental health or substance use crisis, 988 provides 24/7 compassionate support and connection to trained counselors. When you call, text, or chat 988, you'll be quickly connected to trained counselors who will listen to your concerns, provide support, and connect you to additional resources if needed. There is hope. The Lifeline works. You are not alone. For 24/7 support, just call, text, or chat 988.